politics carry as much emotional weight as the F word, fascist or fascism. It is a word used to describe dictators, extremist political opponents, and increasingly modern American leaders. But what does it actually mean? How did it become such a common weapon used in political debate? And is there any historical basis for applying it to the Trump administration? To understand this debate, we have to go back nearly a century. The word fascism comes from Italy's fascist movement, led by Benito Mussolini, who came to power in 1922. And the term comes from the Italian word fascio, which means to bundle or group a series of rods together. It was a symbol from ancient Rome that represented unity and authority. Historically, fascism described a far-right political movement built around extreme nationalism, loyalty to a powerful leader, hostility towards liberal democracy, suspicion of opposition, and often the use of political violence. Nazi Germany, for example, developed its own version of fascism, adding a racial ideology and genocide to create one of history's most destructive regimes. In the United States, the word fascist entered mainstream political language during the 1930s and the 1940s. At first, it was mostly used to describe European dictatorships and their American sympathizers. But after World War II, the term became part of American political combat. Liberals accused some conservatives of supporting authoritarianism. Conservatives accused some liberals of embracing government control. And over time, the word fascist became less of a precise historical description and more of a political insult. During the Cold War and later social movements, the word continued to expand in its definition. It was used against segregationists, communists, anti-war protesters, police forces, corporations, and presidents from both political parties. Because the term became so broadly used, many historians have warned that calling every political opponent a fascist would weaken the word's meaning, and maybe it has. A dictatorship is not created simply because someone uses harsh rhetoric or supports unpopular policies. During Donald Trump's presidency and continuing into the present in his second term, accusations of fascism have become a major part of the American political debate. Critics argue that some of Trump-related actions and rhetoric resemble characteristics associated with historical fascist movements. They point to such things as a strong emphasis on personal loyalty to a leader, attacks on independent institutions and the media, efforts to challenge election results, aggressive nationalist messaging, and rhetoric targeting certain groups of people. Some historians and political scientists argue that these features can overlap with patterns seen in authoritarian and fascist movements. However, supporters of Trump and many critics of the accusation argue that calling Trump's movement fascist is inaccurate. They point out that the United States still has competitive elections, still has courts, opposition parties, and constitutional limits on executive power. However, those things are waning. Still, they argue that controversial policies, populist rhetoric, or conflicts with institutions do not automatically equal fascism. So is the term valid when applied to the Trump administration? Well, that answer depends partly on how narrowly the word is defined. Under strict historical definition, referring to movements like Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Germany, the comparison is disputed. Because modern America is not a one-party dictatorship and does not resemble those regimes in many important ways. But if fascism is viewed more broadly as a set of political tendencies, including extreme nationalism, leader worship, attacks on democratic norms, and hostility toward opponents, Some scholars argue that certain Trump-era behaviors can reasonably be examined through that lens. The debate is not simply about Trump. It reflects a larger question in democracies. When does aggressive political leadership become a threat to democracy? Words like fascist carry the weight of history. Used carefully, they can help identify real, genuine dangers. Used casually, they can become little more than political name-calling. Understanding the history of the word matters because the past gives us lessons, but it also gives us standards. And the challenge for any democracy is knowing the difference. So here's the question for this week. Feel free to answer in the comments. But what are the standards of fascism, and how do they reflect the current Trump administration? We see things like extreme nationalism, the elevation of a supreme leader, attacks on democratic norms, and hostility towards opponents, be that the Democrats, who have been coined as communists, or immigrants even, Muslims. There are a lot of people who are now taking on these attacks. So are those things fascistic? Does Trump administration qualify? So we have to look at the definition of the words. Do you want to go broad or do you want to go narrow? Let me know in the comments what you think. Subscribe and like for more political history explained. I will see you next time.